To Your Honor's attention this morning, I just forgot. It was brought to my attention that this morning someone from my office was in the elevator with a juror, as well as someone from the defendant's family or someone sitting with the defendant. The three of them were in the elevator, and the individual that is friends or family with the defendant started talking with the juror and told her that she liked her sweater, her cardigan was really cute, something like that. The juror had the jury badge very visibly presented on her person. Nothing obviously was spoken about the case, but I just do think it is improper for anyone to be speaking to any of the jurors. There's no reason to be complimenting their clothes. I don't know what the intent was behind it, but I would just like to remind everyone, we've reminded, I just want everyone to be reminded not to speak to jurors, not to interact with them outside of the courtroom or inside of the courtroom. I just wanted to bring that to Your Honor's attention.
Now, ma'am, you knew exactly what you were doing when you decided to get into that elevator and chit-chatting with a juror over a cardigan. Absolutely not. And you're lucky that judge was very nonchalant, because any other judge would probably be like, you got to go. Let's get into the final part of day 2. If you have not been following the case, I'm going to give you a recap. As always, please, major trigger warning. This is Dr. Suzanne Mericle, and she is currently on trial for allegedly taking the life of her boyfriend back in March of 2025. She was a very prominent dentist with a successful dentistry in St. Simon's Island in Georgia. Now, according to the state, the relationship that she had with her boyfriend was extremely toxic. They argued all the time, they had issues, and one of the things that upset her was the fact that in December, prior to his death in 2024, she found out that he was in contact with a woman in Moldova, was sending her money, was sending her messages, and she didn't like it. The arguments continued, and finally in March, she felt that she couldn't take it anymore. The defense is stating that is not what transpired. In fact, she is a domestic violence victim who was essentially abused by her boyfriend multiple times, that she didn't tell anyone because she was essentially threatened to not to. And that particular day, he shot at her, and all she did was defend herself. Let's go into the next witness. This is Bryson Miller. He actually works for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. He is a forensic serologist. A forensic serologist, because I don't know what they did, also screens item of evidence, specifically bodily fluid. We're talking blood, semen, and saliva. On this particular case, he was required to test or swab from the firearm magazine as well as a holster. He shares the first thing that they do, of course, when they receive the items is to swab everything just to kind of compare. And of course, specifically on the holster, it indicated the presence of blood that was positive. However, on the other item that was submitted to him, there was no blood found. The next person on the stand was Martin Gravely. He is actually also GBI, specifically firearms examiner. He goes into what specifically is a firearm, also how he's able to determine if ammunition is actually fired from that particular gun. And the different types of guns. We know that there are long guns, handguns. He goes over all his background and all of his knowledge. He then goes into the evidence that he did receive and how they test it. First, they make sure that the gun is still working, so they fire the gun again, and they kind of save all of the projectile that was picked up by the examiners and by the investigators that he has to review. What it all comes down to is the fact that he actually believes that the shot that took David's life was about 6 inches from him. In other words, shooting at the door, knowing that David is behind that door, an average of 6 inches. When the defense started to cross-examine him, he asked him, like, are you sure it's 6 inches? And he's like, well, it's between this and this, but I'm at 6 inches. Because keep in mind that the defense is stating that she did shoot, but she didn't shoot to take his life. She shot because he had locked himself in the room with her cell phone, with her keys, and she wanted to leave. He wouldn't unlock the door. She was desperate to leave, so she shot at the lock and accidentally took his life. The next witness is Jacob Landon. He is actually a lieutenant at the Hall County Sheriff's Department, and he specifically manages digital forensics. He is the one who received the cell phones from both David and Suzanne, was required to download all of the information. He shares how the process is, how they make sure all of the information is downloaded. He did make it clear that you never know if 100% is downloaded because there's no way to really tell, but that the majority of the information is downloaded. They go over the different messages. Now, they didn't specify what these messages said, but pretty much messages between her and multiple people, as well as a Facebook Messenger and the Bluetooth connections, and also the cell towers. I imagine he was brought onto the stand to set up the foundation because they're going to be going into the text messages and what they said the following day. Now, the next witness is Brandon Melton. He is actually a Glynn County police officer, and he brings up the call from February 1st of 2025. Keep in mind that one of the things the state says, they had multiple domestic violence incidents. Specifically, a month prior to his death, this police officer responded to an incident around 10:15. Someone in the condos where they were contacted police on a possible domestic. Specifically, they heard a disturbance from another room and they were concerned. When they arrive at the scene, of course, start talking, and that third party reports that he heard yelling coming from a room above his. So they go to room 305 and they hear loud talking, of course, knock on the door, and that is when she opens the door. Mr. Barron, which is David, is standing behind her, and they kind of go over the fact that she responds, look, everything is good. I don't need any cops. But you could tell that she was crying. She was emotionally upset. Because he saw that she was emotionally upset, he proceeded to ask her again. At this point, decided to separate them. He said that is common practice when you're responding to a domestic violence incident. So she, again, separate to David. She tells him everything is fine, but then she starts crying and she becomes more upset. He said that he was concerned at the time because he did notice some potential pressure marks. Turns out, though, it was just from excessive rubbing. Now she continues crying. At this point, he's like, look, I know you're upset. Please, tell me what's going on. He says that she grabs his hand and puts it on the back of her head. At this point, he says, instantly, as I'm touching her head, she had a large contusion, pretty much the center of the back of the head. Now, again, they're talking outside. They are separate. Mr. Barron is actually talking to a different officer inside. He asked her, how did you get that bump? She said, well, I slipped and fell. Did she say how she felt? Nope, she didn't. Again, she's extremely emotional. I asked her if she was hit, if Mr. Barron hit her, because at this point she had a bump that was kind of a size of a softball, nothing that you would just simply bump your head on. And eventually she told me that she was standing on the inside of the door, preventing Mr. Barron from coming in. By the time she went to walk away from the door, he shoved the door open. She was holding her purse to go back from a restaurant that they had just left from. She slipped on the tile floor, fell backwards, and struck her head on the floor, which is why she ended up getting that. Now they asked him, did you go inside to actually see if maybe there was a slippery tile, etc.? He said yes. One of the tiles directly in line with the door did have some slippery residue. And then as they continued walking around, they noticed that there was spilled food from that to-go box. So he apparently had cleaned it up prior to them going inside. They called the EMS to have her checked. They asked if she wanted to be transported. She said no. They asked him, did she ever say that he had physically assaulted her? And he said no. In fact, she kept repeating to me that he was a great guy, that he would never hurt her, unlike her previous. When they went to speak to David, David was in a very calm demeanor. He said, look, when I spoke to my other officer, we got together. They both pretty much said the exact same thing had happened. So at that point, they determined that there was no need to arrest him. Now, the final witness of the day was Officer Wheaton, who was on this particular call, and she made it clear that she had never been struck by him. He was a great guy. And furthermore, they had simply got into an argument because he did not finish a relationship or was still kind of an old relationship or still in communication. That is all. Let's go into day 3.